The richest woman in the city stood frozen on a crowded sidewalk with a small paper bag of cookies in her trembling hand because one single bite had just brought back a taste she thought she buried 20 years ago. A taste she never told anyone about, not even her own husband, and now a street girl no older than 20 was staring at her with confused eyes, wondering why a stranger in a designer coat was suddenly crying over a $2 bag of cookies. This is where our story begins. But to understand why this moment mattered so much, we have to go back to a small apartment on the edge of town, where a man everyone simply called the single dad was doing everything he could to survive one more night. The single dad had not always been alone. Years ago he had a wife, a home filled with laughter, and dreams that felt close enough to touch. But life has a cruel way of taking things away when you least expect it, and one rainy November night, his wife left both him and their newborn daughter behind, walking out the door without a single explanation, leaving nothing but a folded blanket and a heartbreak that never fully healed. From that night on, the single dad raised his daughter alone, working double shifts at a bakery downtown just to keep food on the table. He never once complained. He believed that love could fill in every gap that money couldn't reach. His daughter, whom he lovingly nicknamed Sunny because of the way she smiled even during hard days, grew up watching her father knead dough late at night, his hands rough, his eyes tired, but his heart always warm. She used to sit on a wooden stool in the corner of that bakery kitchen, swinging her little legs, asking questions about the world, and dreaming of the day she could bake something all her own. By the time Sunny turned 17, life had gotten harder. The bakery where the single dad worked shut down, and jobs became impossible to find. Rent piled up, bills stacked higher than hope itself. But instead of giving up, they decided to bake cookies at home using an old family recipe the single dad's mother had given him years before. A recipe made with brown butter, a pinch of sea salt, and something Sunny called a secret ingredient of love. Every morning before sunrise, they would bake a fresh batch, wrap them in small paper bags, and Sunny would walk to the busiest street corner in the city to sell them, rain or shine. People often looked at her with pity, seeing a young girl standing on a corner instead of sitting in a classroom. But they didn't know her story. They didn't know the fight behind her smile. One afternoon, an expensive black car pulled up near the sidewalk where Sunny stood. Out stepped a woman dressed in a sharp tailored suit, sunglasses hiding her eyes, her assistant trailing behind her with a phone glued to his ear. This woman was known throughout the city as one of the wealthiest business owners in America. A woman who built an empire from nothing but was known just as much for her guarded heart as her success. Her name was Margaret Hale, and for 20 years she had carried a pain so deep that no amount of money could heal it. Margaret had once been young and desperate too. 2 decades ago, before the world knew her name, she had been a struggling single mother forced into a decision that haunted her every single night. A decision to give up her infant daughter for adoption because she believed, at the time, that the child deserved a better life than the one she could offer. She never forgot the tiny blanket she wrapped her daughter in, and she never forgot the smell of the cookies she used to bake in their tiny apartment kitchen before everything fell apart. Cookies made with brown butter and sea salt, a recipe passed down from her own grandmother. It was the only piece of comfort she had left from those days, a memory locked so tightly in her heart that she thought no one else in the world could ever recreate it. So when Margaret Hale, out of nowhere, decided to stop her car that afternoon simply because she saw a young street vendor with tired eyes reminding her of someone from her past, she never expected what would happen next. She approached Sunny's small stand, picked up a warm cookie, and took a bite without much thought. But the moment the flavor hit her tongue, her whole body went still. Her hands started shaking. Her breath caught in her throat. It wasn't just any cookie. It was the cookie. The same taste, the same warmth, the same secret blend she thought only she knew. "Where did you learn to make these?" Margaret asked, her voice trembling, barely above a whisper. Sunny, confused by the sudden intensity in the stranger's eyes, answered softly, "My dad taught me. It was his mother's recipe." Margaret's heart pounded so hard she thought she might collapse right there on the sidewalk. "Your father," Is he here? Can I meet him? She asked, her voice cracking with something Sunny couldn't quite understand yet. Sunny, sensing something serious in the woman's tone, nodded slowly and offered to walk her back to their small apartment nearby. The entire walk, Margaret's mind spun with questions, memories, and fear, wondering if she was chasing a coincidence or something far bigger than she could imagine. When they arrived, the single dad opened the door, Flour still dusting his sleeves from the morning's baking. The moment his eyes met Margaret's, something in his chest tightened, though he couldn't explain why. "Can I help you?" he asked politely, though his voice held quiet curiosity. Margaret stepped closer, her eyes glassy, her hands trembling as she held up the half-eaten cookie. "This recipe, where exactly did it come from?" The single dad blinked, confused by the emotional weight in her question. "It was my mother's recipe. I taught it to my daughter after." He paused, glancing at Sunny, before continuing softly. "After I found her, actually. She's not biologically mine." The room went silent. Margaret's breath hitched. "What do you mean you found her?" The single dad exhaled slowly, memories flooding back to a night he rarely spoke about. "Almost 20 years ago, I found a baby left outside my apartment building, wrapped in a blue blanket during a terrible storm. I couldn't just leave her there. I took her in, and eventually I adopted her legally. She's been my daughter ever since, in every way that matters." Margaret's knees nearly buckled. Her hands flew to her mouth as tears spilled freely down her cheeks. "A blue blanket, with tiny yellow stars stitched on the corner?" she whispered, barely able to speak. The single dad's eyes widened in shock. "How could you possibly know that?" Margaret's voice broke completely as she said the words she never thought she would speak aloud. "Because I'm the one who left her there. I was young, terrified, and completely alone. I thought giving her up was the only way to save her from a life of struggle. I have regretted it every single day for 20 years. Sunny stood frozen, her heart pounding as the weight of the moment crashed over her. "You're my birth mother?" she asked, her voice trembling with disbelief. Margaret nodded, unable to hold back her sobs. "I never stopped thinking about you. I built an entire empire trying to fill the emptiness you left behind, but nothing ever worked. Nothing ever came close." The room filled with raw emotion, a mixture of shock, heartbreak, and cautious hope. The single dad, though stunned, remained calm, placing a steady hand on Sunny's shoulder. "Whatever happens next," he said gently, "know that nothing changes what we've built together." Sunny turned to him, eyes filled with tears, and hugged him tightly. "You'll always be my dad. Always." Margaret, watching this display of unconditional love, felt something shift inside her. A mixture of grief for lost time and gratitude for the man who raised her daughter with such devotion. Over the next few weeks, an unlikely friendship began to form. Margaret didn't try to steal Sunny away or erase the bond she shared with the single dad. Instead, she asked for something far more meaningful, a chance to be part of her daughter's life moving forward, no matter how small that role might be. She helped them open a small bakery downtown, one built on the very recipe that reunited them, a bakery they proudly named Second Chances. The single dad, once a man who baked in silence just to survive, now stood behind a counter filled with customers, sharing stories, laughter, and warmth with every sale. Sunny worked beside him, no longer standing lonely on a street corner, but thriving in a space built from love, forgiveness, and unexpected miracles. Margaret visited often, sometimes just to sit quietly in the corner and watch her daughter smile, cherishing every second she once thought she would never get back. This story reminds us that life often works in mysterious ways, weaving broken paths back together when we least expect it. Kindness, patience, and love can transform pain into something beautiful, and sometimes the smallest things, like a simple homemade cookie, can carry the power to heal wounds that have lasted for decades. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a comment to share your thoughts, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to Wings of Kindness for more inspiring stories. Remember, even the smallest act of kindness can change someone's life forever.